I never thought I'd hear those words from my own father's mouth. Madeline would only waste the inheritance on caregivers anyway. His voice carried through the partially open study door as I sat frozen in my wheelchair, a tray of tea I'd prepared balanced precariously on my lap. I'd come to surprise them during their meeting with Mr. Winters, our family attorney, thinking it might brighten their day. Instead, I discovered exactly what they thought of me now. "It makes financial sense," my mother added, her voice carrying that practical tone she used for difficult decisions. "The medical trust we've established will cover her basic needs, but the bulk of the estate should go to someone who can properly manage it." "And you're certain about removing her as primary beneficiary?" Mr. Winters asked, his pen likely hovering over the papers. "This is a significant change to your will, Margaret." "We've thought this through carefully," my father replied firmly. "Since the accident, Madeline isn't the same person anymore. She can't manage the business interests, the properties. It would all go to waste." I didn't wait to hear more. I quietly rolled backward, careful not to make a sound, my hands trembling so badly that tea sloshed over the cups and onto my lap. The hot liquid burned through my jeans, but I barely felt it compared to the searing pain in my chest. 8 months after the accident that left me partially paralyzed, my parents had decided I wasn't worthy of my inheritance anymore. Not because I couldn't walk without assistance, but because they thought I was no longer capable of anything. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had always been the responsible one, the Princeton graduate with honors in business administration, the daughter who came back to help expand the family's real estate development company instead of pursuing my own dreams. Now, apparently, I was nothing but a burden, a financial liability, a problem to be managed with a medical trust, while the real assets went elsewhere. I made it back to my room before the tears came, silent and burning hot against my cheeks. Through blurred vision, I looked around at the space that had been remodeled to accommodate my wheelchair-wider doorways, lower countertops, a specially designed bathroom. Modifications that cost money, modifications that apparently made me nothing but an expense in their eyes now. My parents had always measured success in dollars and achievements. Growing up in our mansion in Westchester County, I'd learned early that love was conditional on performance. A piano recital without mistakes earned a rare smile from my father. Straight A's warranted my mother's approving nod. But this was different. This wasn't just disappointment, this was erasure. The changes had been subtle at first. After I returned home from the rehabilitation center, they hired round-the-clock nurses despite my insistence that I could manage with less help. They spoke about me in the third person when doctors visited, as if I wasn't in the room. "Madeline struggles with her physical therapy," my mother would say, while I sat right there, teeth gritted through the pain of doing my exercises. Then came the suggestions that I step down from my position as director of development at our company. "Just until you're better, honey," my father had said, patting my hand condescendingly. I'd agreed reluctantly, thinking it temporary. That was 4 months ago. Last week, they hired my cousin Natalie to fill my position permanently, without even discussing it with me. But changing their will? That was final. That was them saying they had given up on me entirely. I wiped my tears and wheeled myself to my desk, where my laptop sat, open to the project I'd been quietly working on for weeks, a comprehensive analysis of our company's urban development potential in underserved areas, complete with sustainable design innovations I'd researched during my sleepless nights. Work that would never see the light of day now because they'd already decided I was incapable. That night at dinner, I watched them closely, my father cutting his steak with precise movements, my mother sipping her wine, both of them making casual conversation about their day as if they hadn't just erased my future. I wondered how long they'd been planning this, how many hushed conversations they'd had about poor, broken Madeline and what to do about her. "I ran into Natalie at the office today," my father mentioned between bites. "She's already making impressive changes to the riverfront project. Brought in some new investors too." "That's wonderful," my mother replied, not meeting my eyes. She's really rising to the challenge. I'd like to see the new proposals, I said, keeping my voice steady. Maybe I could offer some insights based on my previous work with the project. The silence that followed was deafening. My father cleared his throat. I don't think that's necessary, Maddie. You should focus on your recovery. Stress isn't good for your progress. My brain works perfectly fine, Dad, I replied, a sharp edge creeping into my voice. The accident didn't affect my intelligence or my business acumen. Of course not, dear, my mother interjected smoothly. But you need to prioritize getting better. Dr. Reynolds said your last scans showed potential for improved mobility if you stayed dedicated to your therapy. They were deflecting, redirecting, dismissing tactics I'd seen them use in countless business negotiations. Only now, they were negotiating me out of my own life. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Dr. Samuels, the specialist who had been most honest with me about my condition from the beginning. I need to know exactly where I stand. Medically speaking, I told him when he called back. No sugarcoating, no maybes. Just the facts. His voice was kind, but clinical. Madeline, you've made remarkable progress already. The injury to your spinal cord was incomplete, which is why you've regained some function. You'll likely continue to improve with rigorous physical therapy, but I can't promise you'll walk unassisted again. What I can tell you is that many people with your level of injury lead fully independent, productive lives. Can I live on my own? Work full-time? Drive with modifications? Yes to all of those, potentially. It would take determination and proper accommodations, but there's nothing in your medical records suggesting cognitive impairment or inability to manage your affairs. That was all I needed to hear. I spent the next week making arrangements quietly. I contacted an old college friend who practiced family law. I spoke with my personal banker about accounts only in my name. I reached out to a real estate agent about accessible apartments in the city. And I connected with Tessa Wright, a former colleague who had started her own boutique development firm focused on inclusive urban design. When everything was in place, I finally confronted my parents over breakfast. I found the new will, I said calmly, placing a copy I'd managed to obtain through my attorney friend on the table between us. Specifically, the part where you've removed me as beneficiary because I'd waste the money on caregivers. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's expression hardened into the one he used when closing difficult business deals. You had no right to access private legal documents, he said, his voice dangerously low. And you had no right to decide I'm incapable of managing my affairs because I use a wheelchair, I countered. Did it ever occur to you to talk to me? To ask what my plans were? To believe that maybe, just maybe, your daughter is still the same person she was before a drunk driver hit her car. Madeline, my mother started, reaching across the table. You don't understand the complexities. Actually, I understand perfectly, I cut her off. I understand that you see me as damaged goods. I understand that you've been systematically pushing me out of the company and out of this family since the accident. What I don't understand is how the parents who taught me to never give up could give up on me so completely. My father leaned forward, his business face firmly in place. Be reasonable, Maddie. This isn't about giving up. It's about being practical. The company needs strong leadership. The estate needs proper management. Your condition requires specialized care, which we're providing for in the medical trust. My condition, I repeated slowly. My condition doesn't prevent me from thinking, from planning, from working. It doesn't change who I am. I took a deep breath. I'm moving out next week. I've leased an accessible apartment downtown. I've also accepted a consulting position with Wright Development Group. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if it wasn't so painful to witness. They truly believed I was incapable of functioning without them. That's ridiculous, my father sputtered. You can't possibly manage on your own. Who will help you? What about your therapies? I've arranged for everything I need. As for therapy, Turns out my health insurance, the one I have through my previous position at our company, which you technically can't terminate without proper procedure, covers home visits. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my father at a loss for words. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. "Why would you do this?" she asked quietly. "We've done everything to take care of you." "That's just it, Mom. You've been taking care of me, but you haven't been supporting me. There's a difference. Taking care of someone means doing what you think they need. Supporting them means helping them do what they know they need." The memory of the moment I realized everything had changed flooded back unexpectedly. I wasn't even supposed to be in the car that night. I had planned to stay late at the office finalizing the riverfront project proposals, but my parents insisted I join them for dinner with potential investors. "You're the future of this company, Maddie," my father had said proudly then, his arm around my shoulders. "They should meet you." On the way home, we were talking about the successful dinner when headlights appeared in my window, coming too fast. I remember trying to swerve, the screeching of tires, my mother's scream, the crushing impact, then darkness. When I woke up 3 days later in the hospital, my parents were there, teary-eyed and grateful I was alive. For a brief, naive moment, I thought their love was unconditional after all. That illusion shattered as my recovery progressed, and it became clear my mobility would be permanently affected. Their disappointment was palpable, first in small sighs and worried glances, then in increasingly direct suggestions about stepping back, slowing down, letting others take over. My father stopped bringing company documents for my review. My mother began speaking to doctors without including me. And somewhere along the way, they decided I was no longer fit to inherit what should have been my birthright. I left them sitting at the breakfast table that morning, wheeling myself to my room to continue packing. The photo on my nightstand caught my eye, the three of us at my college graduation, their proud smiles gleaming in the sunshine as they flanked me in my cap and gown. I placed it face down in a box, alongside the business awards I'd won and the family albums that suddenly felt like fiction. The apartment I'd chosen was in a recently renovated building downtown, with wide doorways, accessible appliances, and a stunning view of the city I'd always loved. It cost a significant portion of my savings, but it was worth every penny for the independence it represented. My parents didn't help me move. They watched in stony silence as the movers loaded my carefully labeled boxes. My mother tried one last appeal as I waited for my adapted rideshare vehicle. "Please reconsider, Madeline. We only want what's best for you." "No, Mom," I said gently. "You want what's easiest for you. There's a difference." My first few weeks of independence were challenging but exhilarating. Simple tasks took longer. There were moments of frustration when I couldn't reach something or when fatigue made every movement a struggle. But there were victories too: cooking my first meal in my accessible kitchen, navigating public transportation successfully, setting up my home office where I began consulting work with Tessa's firm. Tessa was everything my parents weren't during this transition: patient, but not patronizing, accommodating without assuming incapability. She had approached me after hearing through industry contacts that I was no longer active in my family's company. "Your work on the riverfront project was brilliant," she'd said during our first meeting. "That kind of thinking is exactly what we need for our new community-focused developments." The wheelchair? Not an issue. We have team members who work remotely half the time anyway. It was during my third week of independence that I met Dr. Marcus Reed. Unlike my previous physical therapists who followed my parents' lead in treating me like a fragile doll, Dr. Reed pushed me hard. "You're not giving me your best effort, Madeline," he said during our second session, ignoring my glare. "I've reviewed your medical records. Your injury allows for more progress than you're making." "Easy for you to say," I snapped, sweat dripping down my face as I struggled with the parallel bars. "Actually, it is," he replied calmly, rolling up his pant leg to reveal a prosthetic limb I hadn't noticed. "Car accident, 9 years ago. Took me 2 years to run again." So yes, I know exactly how hard this is, and I know you're holding back. His honesty shocked me into silence and then into action. Over the next months, I worked harder than I ever had before. Not to walk perfectly again, which Dr. Reed was honest might never happen, but to maximize every capability I still possessed. To strengthen what worked, to adapt where needed, and to acknowledge what couldn't be changed. Recovery isn't just physical, he told me during one particularly grueling session. It's reclaiming your identity when everything that defined you has changed. That hit home harder than he knew. For years, I'd defined myself through my parents' approval, through meeting their expectations. Now, I was learning to define myself on my own terms. I didn't hear from my parents for nearly 3 months after moving out. Then, unexpectedly, my mother called. "Your father had a minor heart attack," she said, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "He's stable, but he's been asking for you." I found him in a private hospital room, looking older and frilier than the towering figure who had dominated my life. For a moment, seeing him connected to monitors and 4 lines, I felt a pang of the old need to please him, to be the daughter he wanted. "You came," he said weakly as I wheeled myself to his bedside. "Of course I came," I replied. "I'm angry with you, Dad. I'm hurt, but I still care." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. "Natalie resigned last week. The riverfront project is falling apart without your vision." He turned to look at me. "I was wrong, Maddie. About a lot of things." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was seismic. We talked more that day than we had in years really talked, without the filters of expectation and performance that had always stood between us. He admitted that fear had driven their decisions after my accident, fear of seeing me struggle, fear of the company failing, fear of change they couldn't control. "We thought we were protecting you," my mother said later, when she joined us. "And maybe protecting ourselves too, from facing what happened." "I don't need protection," I told them both. "I need respect. I need to be seen for who I am now, not mourned for who I was before." It wasn't an instant reconciliation. There were still hard conversations ahead, still trust to rebuild. But it was a beginning. 2 weeks later, my father was back at work, and I received an unexpected delivery at my apartment: the original Riverfront project files, along with a handwritten note. "We could use your expertise as a consultant. Your terms. Your schedule. If you're willing." I smiled as I read it, then wheeled myself to my desk where the updated proposal I'd been working on for Tessa's company sat, alongside my own independent vision for the riverfront area. I had options now. Choices that were mine to make. 6 months after moving out, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. Tessa and some colleagues, Dr. Reed, who had become a friend as well as my therapist, and a few other people who had supported my journey to independence. My parents came too, still awkward in this new dynamic, but trying. My mother hugged me at the door, really hugged me, not the careful embrace she'd used since the accident, as if afraid I might break. My father looked around the apartment with new eyes, noting the adaptations I'd designed myself, the work setup where I managed multiple projects now. "You've built something remarkable here, Maddie," he said quietly, genuine admiration in his voice. Later, as everyone gathered around my dining table that had been specially crafted to accommodate my wheelchair alongside regular chairs, Tessa raised a glass. "To Madeline," she said, "whose designs are transforming not just buildings, but how we think about accessibility in urban spaces." I felt a flush of pride as everyone clinked glasses. This was success on my terms, not measured in dollars or status, but in meaning and impact. After the party, when everyone had left except my parents, my father handed me an envelope. Inside was a legal document, an amendment to their will, reinstating me as an equal beneficiary. "This doesn't change anything for me," I told him, sliding the paper back across the table. "I'm building my own future now." "We know," my mother said softly. "That's why we're doing it. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it. Because you're still our daughter, wheelchair or not. I looked at them, both these imperfect people who had hurt me deeply, who were trying now to understand, to do better. And I realized that forgiveness wasn't about erasing what happened, but about making room for what could be. I've learned something important this year, I told them. Inheritance isn't just about money or property. It's about resilience. It's about finding strength you didn't know you had because you never needed it before. In a strange way, losing your approval was the push I needed to discover who I really am. My father nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. And who are you, Maddie? Who have you become? I smiled, feeling the full weight and wonder of my answer. I'm still figuring that out. But I know this much: I'm not defined by what I lost in that accident. I'm defined by what I've built since then. And I'm just getting started. We sat together as evening fell, three people finding their way back to family, not the one we'd been before, with its conditions and expectations, but something new. Something real. Perhaps, in time, something stronger. Life doesn't always give us second chances. Sometimes it gives us new beginnings instead. Mine came when I realized that the worst thing that happened to me, the accident, my parents' betrayal, the loss of the future I'd planned, led to the best thing: discovering my own strength, independent of anyone's approval or expectations. There are some wounds that never fully heal, some losses that remain. I still have days when pain makes everything harder, when the wheelchair feels like a prison rather than a tool. But then I look at what I've built from the wreckage: a career that matters, relationships based on genuine acceptance, and the unshakable knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am. That knowledge is the true inheritance, one that no one can ever take away.